There was a huge gang of crows that lingered around the building for weeks after they pulled out Robo Cop's body from downstairs. That was just one of the many dark signs of how life changed after a cop's body was found dead in the projects, which was already a sad place. But now our neighborhood seemed to have given birth to something even more dreary than anyone could have ever imagined. The slickers were around even more, chasing people through the neighborhood, kicking in doors, beating and robbing whoever they wanted. They didn't give a fuck if you were elderly, an infant, or crippled. They kicked in your apartment door, smashed up stuff, and accused you of hiding drugs or knowing something about what happened to Robo Cop. This was the police's way of getting revenge because they felt someone had killed one of their own. So they needed 1,000 pounds of flesh to make up for it, and they were bloodthirsty to get it. The news never revealed how Robo Cop died. All they said was that his body was found in the underground area of Prairie Court's housing projects. Regardless of how hard I tried, I couldn't shake that one image that stuck in my mind. That cop dressed in black, carrying the large red plastic container with biohazard on it, which I knew had the mangled 3-fingered hand inside. Prairie Courts, which the streets referred to as the PCs or Pimp City, was one of the smaller housing projects on the south side. It didn't carry the reputation of the Robert Taylors, Stateway Gardens, Ida B. Wells, Dearborn Homes, or the Ickeys, but still had a treacherous history. Pimp City. That's how most housing projects got their names. It was usually a slick way of referring to what the area was known for, which normally had something to do with violence, gangs, or the old school culture of the area. Funny thing was I was too young to know what a pimp actually looked like. But I remembered one of my father's close friends, Slick Al, who always dressed extremely nice and hung around a bunch of women. One of my strongest memories of Slick Al was him showing my father an extremely shiny .38 caliber pistol that he carried in a small area of his back. As he sipped on a beer, talking to my father, "Zeke, I wish I could be like you. Have a wife, family, and kids. You're a good man. But these streets and these hoes would eat me alive if I didn't keep my foot on these bitches' motherfucking throat." Big Al snickered as he spoke to my father, while tapping what I now know to be a pimp stick against his leg. A pimp stick was a homemade blackjack or club made from a small 6-inch metal pipe wrapped in old socks inside a bent metal coat hanger used to give it a frame, then wrapped heavily with a bunch of electrical tape, with the tip of the hanger used for a handle. This is what pimps used to beat women and some men, and it wouldn't leave any bruises or marks. It's sad and crazy how this ghetto technology took shape in someone's mind and was used to brutalize and control women. It was a gloomy and rainy day when Batman led a huge raid of slickers into the building around noon. They were trying to catch people off guard, even though everyone always knew they could come at any moment. Me, James, and Leroy were on spring break, sitting on the porch playing Uno as the Slickers rushed into the building, dashing upstairs, kicking in apartment doors above us and yelling, "Police! Police! Let me see your hands! Hands up, motherfucker!" James and I sat nervously, worrying and hoping they weren't coming to us. But it didn't bother Leroy at all, as he just sat staring at the cops, almost as if he was dreaming about being down there with them as they ran inside, jamming their guns in people's faces. Since that strange day he showed us RoboCop's body, Leroy had an eerie obsession with the Slickers. "They're here," Leroy said with this calm, weird excitement as the Slickers rushed inside. He popped up from the Uno game and walked down the porch and just stood there quietly as he flicked a single Uno card with his thumb, with this strange grin on his face. It was like he wanted to be as close to them as possible, to hear the cops screaming and yelling, like he fed off of it, like it got him high. Leroy never said anything about the day he took us to see RoboCop's body. It was almost as if it never happened, which made James even more freaked out because he constantly brought up Leroy's eerie cryptic words to me. "We are creatures. We crawl, we climb, and we consume." He killed him, Ricky. Leroy killed RoboCop, and you know it, James whispered intensely as we looked at Leroy standing down the porch quietly, focused on the police cars downstairs. James continued, "I just don't know how he did it. He's so damn skinny. He never plays basketball, strikeout, or football with us. But he killed a cop. He killed RoboCop, a huge-ass man that had a gun. Why don't you quit being a pussy and ask him how he did it?" I said, teasing James. "Are you crazy? You ask him." James replied, "I'm not, because I don't think he did it," I said, while constantly trying to convince myself that someone I knew as a close friend wasn't capable of taking a life. But deep down inside, I knew something was wrong, as things never felt the same with Leroy. But who am I kidding? After being tortured by the cops and finding RoboCop's body, who wouldn't be changed after that? At that point, I just considered everything a bunch of really bad luck, which was common living in the projects. As we were dealing with our own drama in the PCs, something else strange started happening in other projects and areas on the south side. Something was killing a bunch of dogs and cats and leaving their mangled, chewed up bodies all over the place, in alleyways, bushes, and in parks. Word around town was that a mountain lion had escaped while they were taking it to Brookfield Zoo on the north side. But the cage popped open, and now this wild animal was supposedly stalking our streets. The news wasn't saying anything about it either, and nobody was shocked about that, especially since the south side is where the majority of all the black folks live. So they were just out setting a bunch of traps and hunting to capture it. It might sound hard to believe, but anything can happen when you think about the history of Chicago, which is still one of the most segregated cities in America. As we continued watching Leroy while listening to the cops screaming upstairs, James turned to me. "Did you hear about all the dogs and the cats?" "Yeah, who hasn't?" I replied. Nah, but did you hear about the Wades found all of their dogs chewed up in the grass last night when they let them go outside to pee? Both pit bulls and Elbow. Elbow, I said, shocked. Yeah, big ass Elbow, James replied. Old Mr. Wade and his wife had two of the meanest pit bulls you ever wanted to see, plus a gigantic Rottweiler the hood called Elbow. That's because he got his name after ripping off the elbows of several crackheads that tried to break into the Wade's home while they were gone. Killing two vicious pit bulls would have been a massive challenge for anything, even a mountain lion. But killing Elbow also would have taken something so powerful that even I couldn't begin to imagine. Ricky, I think those folks let that lion loose on the south side on purpose. That's what's killing all those dogs, and probably what killed Robo Cop, James said. I stood quiet, not really knowing how to respond to James. I mean, there was so much stuff going on with Robo Cop being dead, the slickers down our throats, and now a damn mountain lion was on the loose. All of this didn't seem real. I finally shook it off and turned to James. Nah, fool. I mean, I don't know. Things just seem like they're getting crazier and crazier around here. My mama talking about moving us to Mississippi. She said she tired of all this shit, James said. I don't blame her, I said as we both turned to Leroy, who was still standing alone, staring at the cop cars. What is that fool doing? James said, when suddenly Batman appeared downstairs by himself, smoking a cigarette while the rest of the cops were upstairs. Leroy just stood there on the porch all alone, like an eerie scarecrow in the middle of the cornfield, his eyes glued on Batman like a predator studying its prey, stalking and lurking from above. Leroy was so still, it was almost as if like he vanished to his own mysterious place as he went back into that trance that I hadn't seen since we were down in the bowels of the building, looking at RoboCop's body. Leroy started mumbling to himself, whispering something under his breath that we couldn't hear. What is he saying? James asked. Hell, I don't know. He's crazy. The slickers are gonna kill him, James whispered, so I got up and headed towards Leroy. Ricky, where are you going? Chill, I'll be right back, I told James as I slowly edged down the porch when suddenly Batman looked up and locked eyes with Leroy. What the fuck are you looking at, little nigga? Batman growled as Leroy stood quietly, not giving any response. Hurry! Hurry! I know you heard me, motherfucker, Batman barked, but Leroy still didn't reply. I hurried, making something up to tell Batman, he's kinda slow, officer. He can't speak. Well, you better take that little retarded motherfucker in the house before I come up there. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I said with a sigh of relief. As I got closer to Leroy, his mumbling got louder and louder until I finally got close enough to hear what he was saying. We crawl, we climb, we consume. We crawl, we climb, we consume. Shocked, I paused as those words dragged me back into the darkness, the deafening of the buzzing of the flies, the slime, the sewage, and the smell of the body, which at that very moment made me believe now more than ever that Leroy actually killed RoboCop. But inside my chest, I knew that this person that stood in front of me wasn't the kid I grew up with, spending countless hours running around in the projects, laughing and having fun. Something had changed him long before RoboCop tortured him on that Halloween night. Batman finally disappeared back into the building, going upstairs as Leroy kept whispering and chanting those eerie words. We crawl, we climb, we consume. We crawl, we climb, we consume. I finally touched Leroy on the shoulder, and he suddenly stopped, turned towards me and smiled. Hey James, is it my turn for Uno? Are you okay? I asked, and Leroy grinned. Yeah, I'm good. Are you sure? I said. Yeah, what's up? He replied. You're just down here staring at Batman like he won't come up here and kick our asses. Leroy grinned and said, we shouldn't be scared of them anymore, Ricky. We shouldn't be scared of them anymore. And why is that? I said, anxiously waiting for his response. But Leroy just gave me this weird smile, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the hallway stairs. Leroy! Leroy! Where are you going? I called out, trying to get his attention as he barely glanced over his shoulder before vanishing into the dark hallways. James rushed up. Where is he going? I don't know, I said. What did you say to him, Ricky? Nothing. We were just talking. Then he walked off. I didn't want to tell James about the eerie, weird look in Leroy's eyes. But before our thoughts could wander, James pointed downstairs. Ricky, look! Leroy appeared, standing next to Batman's undercover police car, as James and I stood in complete shock. Leroy! Leroy! We both yelled, softly as we could, trying not to be too loud. But he just stood there, never even looking up at us, as we continued screaming, Leroy! Leroy! What the fuck is he doing? James squawked. After a few seconds, Leroy finally looked up at us, and with this blank, emotionless gaze, he opened the back door of Batman's police car and gat on the inside. James and I stood frozen in complete shock. What the fuck, Ricky? What are we gonna do? Huh? James yelled. But I was so thrown off, I couldn't move. What was going on? Why was he doing this? And what could we possibly do? Ricky! Ricky, look! James pointed as Batman and the other cops appeared downstairs. Shit! They're gonna kill him, Ricky! What are we gonna do? I stood, shocked and confused. What the fuck was Leroy trying to do? Did he want to get himself killed? And what are the cops gonna do when they find him? Batman and the other slickers got inside their cars, laughing and joking around after their latest raid of terror, and then pulled off with Leroy inside the back seat. James kept screaming, "Ricky! Ricky! What are we gonna do, huh? What are we gonna do?" My mind was racing. I didn't know whether we should call Leroy's mother or call the police and hope that someone could stop the Slickers from killing him. James and I stood on the porch as Batman's car rolled away, finally leaving out of the parking lot when, "You guys want to finish playing Uno?" We turned around, and standing near the stairwell was Leroy, smiling like nothing was wrong. Completely thrown, James and I stood quiet, not knowing whether this person standing in front of us was Leroy or a ghost. We both saw him get inside the police car and didn't see him get out. But here he was, standing in front of us, just as calm as he could be, still holding the single Uno card in his hands. As he tried walking past us, James yelled, "Nigga, are you crazy or something? Huh? What the fuck is wrong with you?" "What? What are you talking about?" Leroy replied. "You got into the back seat of Batman's car." A small grin formed on Leroy's face. "So? What's he gonna do? Beat me up again?" "No. Maybe he'll just kill you," James replied. "He can't kill me," Leroy said as he handed me the single Uno card and disappeared back into the darkness of the stairs. James immediately turned to me. "Ricky, he never got out of that car, and you know it. Leroy never got out of that fucking car." I stood silent as my mind raced to find the answer. Maybe he slid out on the other side and we didn't see him. Or maybe he never got into that car at all. I didn't know what to believe. James went home, asking me if I wanted to spend the night with him because he was so scared. But I said no. As much as I didn't want to be alone either, I knew none of us would ever tell our parents or anyone else what was going on. It was later that night, after finishing dinner. I was falling asleep playing with the Uno cards on the floor while watching television when my father walked inside and turned on the 10 o'clock news. I yawned, got up, and started getting ready for bed when my heart jumped from what I saw on the TV. It was another white van, sitting around a bunch of flashing lights and police officers standing outside as a huge black plastic body bag was rolled away from the car that looked exactly like the one Leroy got into the back seat of. And that's when my mind started racing. We saw him get into the car. We didn't see him get out. We saw Batman drive off. And then Leroy appeared, standing next to us as the cop cars drove away. I tried to remain calm, thinking it was a different car, that someone else got shot, and there was no way this was happening. And that's when I saw the words on the bottom of the TV screen that said, "Southside narcotics officer found dead laying next to his car." That's when my thoughts dragged me back to the porch earlier that day, as Batman yelled upstairs and I rushed toward Leroy, standing by himself, whispering, "We crawl, we climb, and we consume. We crawl, we climb, and we consume."